Hey, and welcome to Lesson 1, where we'll talk about what organizations. So I know this sounds pretty straightforward, and it is for the most part, but there's some nuances here that we'll need to talk about because they can be pretty important. So obviously we're just going to be talking about which organizations you should target for endorsements or for support. So in this lesson, we're going to first start out by making a big list of organizations. So I'll tell you some best ideas on how to do that. Step 2, look for any red flags, organizations you shouldn't be targeting or affiliated with. And then step 3, we'll talk about platform and electoral considerations that might manifest as red flags for organizations you shouldn't pursue for endorsement, or it might bring up some little nuances. You need to adapt your strategy for how you reach out to those organizations, or even change your own platform or your own electoral considerations. So let's jump into it with step 1. So here we'll be making a big list. So I just threw some logos on here of common types of organizations that people reach out to. We have the Chamber of Commerce, so business-oriented organizations, business associations. Have a AFL-CIO, so there's labor unions. There's an endless amount of labor unions, and some are bigger in different communities than others, and they often tend to be very political. The equal sign there, that's the Human Rights Campaign. The United States' largest LGBT advocacy organization. And then NRDC, so National Resource Defense Council, which is an environmental and conservation advocacy organization. So just some thought starters of the types of organizations that I'm thinking of and that I've worked with in the past on political races, political endorsements. So step 1, make a big list. So just start with the first ones that come to mind. I just threw out some there. So think about your community and organizations that you know are politically active or might be interested in supporting your candidacy. Second, go to candidates' websites. So other candidates for office other candidates that have run for office in your area. It doesn't have to be the same office. It could be, if you're running for city council, it could be mayor or county supervisor or even Congress. And just take a look at the endorsement section of their websites and list all those down in your big giant list. Third way that you can do this is just Google your office title that you're looking for, plus the word endorsements, and see if you can find any old news stories, or perhaps any just blog postings, web page articles anywhere that talk about endorsements. And fourth, you can look at campaign finance reports. So I know that in California, all of this was on the FPPC website, the Fair Political Practice Commission website, and I imagine there's similar resources in other states. And then for federal races, I believe it's on the FEC's website where they house all these campaign finance reports. But essentially, you can look at any campaign committee that has been formed. So perhaps you're running for Assembly District 15 in California. You can go back and look at last year's candidates for Assembly District 15. Let's say, John Smith for Assembly, and if that was the name of his campaign committee. And then you can go and find all of their campaign disclosures, and you can look and see, you can see individuals that gave money to them, but you can see all the organizations and the political action committees that gave money to them. And so if you find a political action committee, it'll typically have it'll typically have a name that goes back to an organization. So if it's, maybe it's a labor union, it's SEIU 1000 Political Action Committee, something like that. Or like the Sacramento Stonewall Democrats Political Action Committee. So you can look at those campaign finance reports to really build out your big long list. Something else that you'll want to include here, I know this kind of seems like media and advertising, but I wanted to include it here when we talk about endorsements, is newspaper editorial boards. So I'm not sure how familiar you guys would be with this, but every newspaper has an editorial board, and they decide the like general tone and direction of the newspaper. They are the ones that are responsible for ensuring that the newspaper is reporting accurate information, that they are not taking bias one way or direction outside of the expected like tone and journalistic integrity of the newspaper. And these editorial boards, they are also responsible for taking official positions on matters of public policy and elections. So the New York Times makes a formal endorsement of candidates for political office, all the way from New York City Council all the way up to President of the United States. So your local newspapers will do the same thing, and you will want to include that in your list of organizations to track and make sure that you are appropriately seeking their endorsement, because it can make a big difference. If someone if someone is not super prepared for election day, which most voters are not, even me, who's obsessed with politics and knows every last little thing that's going on, I'll go in to vote, and there's certain races where I'm like, I don't really know much about either one of these candidates, and I'm not sure which way to go. In that case, I mean, I never walk into the voting booth like that, because I'm like a super duper prepared voter. But in those situations where I don't know much about the candidates, I tend to look to organizations, individuals, and newspapers that I trust and whose opinion that I respect. And I see what official stance they've taken in those races and read about them. So you'll want to include newspaper editorial boards on your list. Now, step 2, we're going to do a little digging. So you have your big long list of organizations that you can seek support from, and now we want to know a little bit more about them. So the first thing is just a comprehensive look at what they stand for. So most of these organizations, you're going to have a good feel for what they stand for and what they're doing, like your local Chamber of Commerce, you know what they are. So just go down the list. Ones that you're not super sure about, just go to their website and just figure out like just the big picture, big idea of who they are and what their values are, and like what their main purpose or mission is. Then you're going to do just a simple Google News search of the organization, and then you can add keywords on like scandal or disaster or like heated argument, or add words on like that, just to see if there's anything that's been out there in the press about them that could raise a red flag. I'm assuming most of you know how to do this, but just simple news.google.com, and then enter in the name of that organization. If there's lots of words in the name of the organization, put quotes around it, so it gives you the exact organization. So you just want to see if there's been anything out there in the press. So third is, this might be a little bit hard to get a hold of or fully ascertain, but you want to know what their political strategy is. And the reason I say this is, like 99.9% of the time, you're not going to have any issues here. But let's say you are seeking the endorsement of a local like LGBT rights organization, and you've been like the biggest supporter of all things LGBT rights for decades and decades, before it was cool, before every Democrat was doing it, and so that you're golden on the issues. So you're like, okay, great, yeah, I'm gonna seek the support of that. Let's just say like Sutter County LGBT political association, and but then you do a little bit digging to figure out more about their political strategy, and you learn that they want their organization in general to be going further to the left. They want to be appealing to a base that's more favoring of like socialist type policies. And I don't say like socialism as like a buzzword or like a stupid meaning that it has today, but like socialist policies that are more in favor of like higher taxation, government owning more responsibility of delivering everyday services, and so they're only wanting to be endorsing candidates more in that regard. They're like taking a turn towards like the Bernie wing of Democratic primary voters from the 2016 election. Fine, whatever, they can do that as an organization. But if you know that that's not how you want to shape your platform and shape your candidacy, that you know from your overall electoral considerations for your district that you're going to need to run a like center left platform and campaign, then while it might be helpful to have the endorsement of that organization, what if they start touting you, they do endorse you, and then they start touting that they only have progressive candidates that are going to be fighting for the values that Bernie Sanders came so close to bringing to our country in 2016, and democratic socialism is the wave of the future, and we're so proud of our candidate. You know, that starts getting a little bit tough for your campaign and how to explain that. So that's the sort of thing that I want you to consider when I say what is their political strategy. It's a lot of work to go and try and ascertain this for every organization that you might be seeking the endorsement of, or that might be reaching out to you to endorse. So it's, like I said, like 99.9% of the time you're going to be fine, and these organizations are going to have a long, steady record of who they are and what they stand for and what their political strategy is, and they're not going to be just flip-flopping it all of a sudden or taking a hard change all of a sudden, but it is something to be mindful of and something that your political chair on your campaign kitchen cabinet or paid staff should do. But that's a really great job for them to check in on. So another place that I mentioned earlier is campaign finance reports. So you can take a look at this. If this is an organization that offers an endorsement and campaign contributions, then they must be registered as a political action committee with the appropriate regulators. So you can take a look at their filings and see who they've given money to in the past. Maybe you don't want the support of a political action committee that gave money to Donald Trump or gave like a sizable donation to the Yes on Proposition 8 campaign, which was in California a while back, which eliminated the right. It changed the California state constitution to eliminate the right of gay and lesbian couples to marry. So and maybe you don't want anything to do with anybody that gave any money to those organizations. So that's a good place to check, is the campaign finance reports for that. The last thing here is newspaper editorial boards. So this is an easy one. You can take a look back at candidates that those newspapers have endorsed, and maybe or even like policy proposals, propositions and initiatives that have hit the ballot for the voters. You can take a look at stances they've taken on all of those really easily using probably just using the newspaper's website, and look at their historical endorsements, or do like if you have to dig, you can use news.google.com to dig around even more, or you can just do like an advanced search in Google and limit it to you put in parentheses, you put site, S-I-T-E, site, colon, and then put the URL for that newspaper's website, and then everything that you search would be limited to results on that site. Or just go to advanced.google.com and you can put it in there without having to kind of code it in yourself. And then you can just search the word endorsement. So moving on here, we'll talk about platform and electoral considerations. So this is a little bit more tricky. This is where we really put on our political strategy hat and really think through some of the nuances here. So on your big giant list, after you do a little bit digging and after you figure out the general purpose of each one of them, you can probably eliminate a handful of them. If you don't support gay marriage, you're not going to reach out to the local Stonewall Democrat club for their endorsement, because I can guarantee you, years and years ago, they weren't endorsing anybody that didn't support gay marriage. Now that gay marriage is a law of the land and has been, and the U.S. Supreme Court has said so, they're definitely not endorsing you. You can take that out of there. If you are like a democratic socialist, self-described democratic socialist, a la Bernie Sanders, and rallying against corporations all the time, you're probably not going to get the support of your local chamber of commerce. So you might eliminate that as well. So eliminate the obvious non-fits. Now let's take a look at this most interesting question here about bending or changing your own platform. So we talked a lot in lesson 2 about your campaign message, in which we started with identifying how you think and how you feel on particular issues, and then built it out to be this overall policy platform that informs your overall campaign message. So think back to all that, take a look back at all of it for a refresher, and then we have to think about, are you going to go back and change any of that to get the support of an organization? So let's just continue with the gay marriage example, actually, because it's kind of a simple binary issue and it's easy to understand. Let's say that you are that you're running for office in, let's say, Sacramento. You're running for office in Sacramento, and you are opposed to gay marriage. But you want the support of the Sacramento Stonewall Democratic Club. You're a Democrat running for office in a primary. And you want the support of the Sacramento Stonewall Democratic Club because it's really, really big. They have a lot of money to put behind candidates. They have a huge volunteer base that will go out and walk precincts for you, make phone calls for you, come to your campaign office and stamp envelopes, all of that. So you really, the support of Sacramento Stonewall would be very valuable. So now you're faced with this question of, or this dilemma. You're like, well, I don't support gay marriage, and Sacramento Stonewall, they're definitely going to want candidates that support gay marriage. So like, what are your different options? What can you do here? So the first is you can just not seek their endorsement. The upside here is that you're staying true to yourself. You're not changing your values. Can't be seen as a flip-flopper or anything like that. And at the end of the day, you can feel good that you stayed true to who you are. The downside here is that, obviously you're not going to get their endorsement because you're not even seeking it in the first place. And then the fact that you're not even reaching out to them to have a conversation about support can look pretty bad, especially if it's a large organization. It can be seen that you're just excluding a large part of your community. And so that in itself just does not look good, whether or not you think you would get their endorsement or not. Not having the conversation looks bad. So a second option here would be to seek their endorsement and change your stance on the issue. So the upside here is obviously you have a better chance at getting their endorsement. So that's a big upside, is that they might give you the endorsement. Another upside here is that you could be seen as someone that's willing to compromise, to move forward, someone that's willing to reach out to people that they might not otherwise agree with, and forge new relationships and forge partnerships for your community. It can be spun that way, or taken at face value really for that way. A downside here, though, is that you could be seen as a flip-flopper, that you just magically go from opposing gay marriage your whole life to then supporting it. It's tough, but it's happened for millions and millions of people across the United States. Gay marriage support today is way higher than it was a decade ago, and a lot of those people changed their minds because they probably knew someone that was gay and saw them happy with someone or something like that, and so then they changed their mind on it. It's happened a lot. Another potential downside here to this option of changing your stance and seeking Stonewall's endorsement would be that you could lose some of your core supporters, people that supported you in the first place because of your stance on that issue. That's a potential downside. And a risk for this strategy is simply that Stonewall would say, and this is just illustrative, I'm just talking about this gay marriage example, I'm talking about Stonewall as an example, purely illustrative. A risk would be that Stonewall would say, well, that's really, really, really great that you support gay marriage, and we're so happy to have another prominent member of our community, on the right side of this issue, but we're deciding to endorse candidate B because candidate B has been marching in the Sacramento Gay Pride Parade with us for the past 12 years. So, you could lose out to someone that has a bit more history of support there. That's a big risk here. So the third strategy that you could do here when faced with this dilemma of bending or changing your platform is that you could seek the endorsement of the organization, in this example, Stonewall, but don't change your stance. So in this case, you seek their endorsement, you fill out their questionnaire and have the interview and whatever is required, and we'll talk about that in the next lesson. But you just keep your stance the way that it is. You say, I'm opposed to gay marriage, here's why I am, here's why I am, and you do it in the most respectful way possible. You explain how you think about the issue and why you feel the way that you do and what that means from a public policy perspective. And you're just upfront and very straightforward with them. Potential upside here is that you're staying true to yourself. You're not changing your values. Definitely can't be seen as a flip-flopper. But at the same time, you're also seen as someone that's trying to be inclusive, that's trying to forge relationships with someone that you otherwise might not have a good relationship with. And that you really tried to be inclusive. Potential downside is that you're not going to get the endorsement. But that's kind of a potential downside throughout the whole thing. So I can't recommend one of these strategies for you, and it greatly depends on whatever the issue is. Sure, it would be an issue that's much more nuanced than the simple binary question of do you support gay marriage, yes or no. So this is one of those things that you're going to have to talk through with your kitchen cabinet, definitely. So that's it for lesson 1. In the next lesson, we will talk all about the endorsement process. So it's something that I've been alluding to this whole time, but we'll get really into the nitty-gritty of how the whole endorsement process works for these organizations typically. So see you in a minute.